Hello, I'm Carrie Jacobson. I am one of the outreach people for Center for Change. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Lynette Taylor here with us to do our webinar. We're so excited for this. And I just wanted to say a couple of things real quick to kind of do some housekeeping, and then we will move forward with everything. So we have attendees are welcome to submit questions in the questions pane located in the toolbar, and the presenter will try and get to a few questions at the end of the presentation. A copy of the post test is in the handout pane in the toolbar. Feel free to view or print the test questions for review during the webinar. However, the test must be taken online to receive CE credit. A copy of the PowerPoint slides and other handouts are in the handouts pane in the toolbar. At the end of the presentation, the webinar program will ask attendees to complete an evaluation. After about an hour, after the presentation ends, the attendees will receive a follow-up email with instructions regarding taking the post-test and receiving a certificate of attendance. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Lynette has worked at Center for Change since January of 1998, where she created and implemented the current music therapy program. Lynette graduated with her BS in music therapy from Utah State University and went on to complete a clinical internship at the University of Utah Neuropsychiatric Institute. With her accomplishments in violin, voice, guitar, and piano, Lynette has developed and adapted countless music therapy interventions designated for the eating disorder population. Lynette loves to read, travel, sew, and teach violin lessons in her free time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lynette, and we'll go ahead and get started. So give me 1 second here. Let's see, for some reason, there we go. Okay, did it come your way? It did. All right, great. So I will turn off my mic and my video, and if you need anything, I'm still here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carrie. I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for tuning in. What an honor this is to be able to speak with you, share with you some of the experiences I've had as a music therapist at Center for Change. As Carrie mentioned, I've been there for a little while, almost half my life. I have a real sweet place in my heart for people struggling with eating disorders. I think it's because I have struggled myself as a teenager. I'm so blessed to be in recovery for about 26, 27 years now, but I have a great love for those who struggle. And I just wanted to reach out a little bit that if there are any of you that are watching today, listening today, that have struggled with an eating disorder and find yourself in recovery, I applaud you. And if there are any of you right now that are still struggling, I just want to encourage you and implore you to keep fighting. You have a big, beautiful life waiting for you to happen. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity. My presentation is going to be kind of a brief overview of what I have been able to do at the Center for Change. I wish I could go into more detail about everything, but hopefully you'll get a little bit of a taste of what we do in our program here. I'm just excited. I want to go ahead and get started. Okay, so I wanted to start off with a story. This is a true story about a man named Francesco Littoral. I love this particular picture of him. He has so much emotion in his face. So Francesco Littoral is a musician, a musicologist, a music teacher in Italy. And he has made it his life's work to find and share works of music that have been composed in concentration camps during World War II. So this is him holding up a sample of an original work. I didn't know that people had composed music while in the concentration camps. I love this quote that he says, "When man loses his deepest liberties, he sings more." So far, Francesco Littoral has recovered over 8,000 works, 8,000 compositions that people in the concentration camps composed, and they would write on anything they could find, on burlap sacks, on mess tins, toilet paper. They would scratch it in the walls. They would use food wrappers, just anything that they can. They wanted to feel like they had a voice in the middle of hardship. And that's the concept I wanted to kind of focus on today a little bit, is that idea of reaching out and finding a voice in the middle of something that's very difficult. There was one particular man I wanted to highlight. His name is Rudolph Carroll. He was in the concentration camps. Francesco Littoral has found over 300 compositions by Rudolph Carroll. He actually did pass away in the concentration camp, but he would compose music mostly on toilet paper and using charcoal medication. One of the reasons I wanted to highlight him is that there's a piece of music that he composed during his stay in the concentration camp that is reminiscent a lot of Morse code. It sounds kind of like that, dee, 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 dee. And it made me think of somebody in that situation wanting to send a kind of a secret message out when you feel like you have no voice that he was trying to communicate. It's not actual Morse code, it just kind of has that sound to it. So I had this idea, this thought, like how many times have we worked with clients, have we worked with patients who maybe have a difficult time talking about their feelings, their emotions, their thoughts, but they try to send us these maybe hidden messages. And are we in tune with that? Are we able to decipher and to understand and catch those messages as they happen? Now, if you can see up in the top right-hand corner, anything that has a box around it with an asterisk or just an asterisk is going to be a test question. So I'm giving you a little cheat sheet here. So Rudolph Carroll composed music using toilet paper and charcoal medication. Okay, I'm going to leave the screen for just a second because I want to share with you this sample of Rudolph Carroll's piece of music that sounds a little bit like Morse code. I'll only play a little snippet of it and I'll be right back. Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear that. So I find that to be fascinating, this concept, this idea of finding voice in the middle of a hardship. And there's a more maybe modern application to this, and we've all experienced this over the last couple of years with COVID, that there have been many times when we probably felt like maybe we didn't have a voice. There have been things that have been beyond our control, things that have been very difficult. There have been a lot of difficult situations, difficult stories, there's been loss. And this quote by Littoral that says, in the end, it shows what mankind is made of. And even through intense sufferings, our intelligence is not choked off, but can be multiplied. And here's some pictures of people in Italy coming out onto their balconies to sing during quarantine when they were not able to communicate with other people. They found a voice in the middle of great difficulty. I just wanted you to think about, how do you find your voice in the middle of great difficulty? So I want to share with you some experiences, like I said, I've had using music therapy and helping the patients I've worked with eating disorders to reclaim and rediscover and find and have a voice. And I wanted to start off with a case study. This is actually not an eating disorder example, but hopefully it will apply to what I'm sharing. You can see in the left-hand corner, there is another test question. So you might want to pay attention to that. I had the opportunity to intern at a psychiatric hospital. And during that internship, I was able to work with somebody who had a tragic accident. And this accident left this patient with aphasia. And that means that they were unable to use speech to communicate. And also their hands were affected, so written language was out as well. Through different various methods, we were able to discern that this patient felt like their dignity had been taken, as well as their voice. And so there is a technique used by music therapists, and it's also a technique used by speech and language pathologists called melodic intonation therapy. And I find this fascinating. Melodic intonation therapy is basically rerouting language from the left hemisphere of the brain where there could be damage, and aphasia is actually damage done to the left hemisphere of the brain. And you can reroute that through the right hemisphere of the brain where music is processed. And how we do this is by pairing a simple melody with words. So this patient that I worked with was unable to speak any words at all. So for example, on the screen, you see this example of I love you. So the patient was unable to say I love you. But if I paired that with a very, very basic melody, I love you, this patient was able to sing that. So in a way, this patient was able to claim and have a voice again. The great thing about melodic intonation therapy is that over time, we can actually phase out that melody and they can learn how to speak again, but through a different pathway of the brain, as music is processed mostly in the right hemisphere. So a simple example would be the I love you, and then gradually we'd add words to that. I love my children. And then if we got more and more advanced, I love my daughter and my son. So this patient over time was able to learn basic phrases and words. And we were able to phase out the melody part of that. And they were able to learn how to speak again using a different hemisphere of the brain. That was a highlight of my internship for sure. So there's a man by the name of Gottfried Schlag, Dr. Schlag, who is an associate professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School. He's done a lot of work and research about music and the brain, specifically melodic intonation therapy. And one of the things that he has found, I'll just highlight the first bullet point, is that music is the most complex form of auditory stimulation. Listening to and making music is not only an auditory experience, but a multisensory motor experience, which has the potential to change brain structure and function. And that's what I wanted to highlight, is this ability that music has to potentially change brain structure and function. So not only can people relearn how to speak, but they can actually heal some parts of their brain. So this is a scan of somebody who had undergone an intense course of melodic intonation therapy that shows that there is actually some improvement in brain function there. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay. Now, the reason I wanted to share this particular example, because most of our clients that we work with at the center don't have aphasia, but they do struggle with something else called alexithymia. This may not be a new term for you, but I like this quote, this high levels of alexithymia have been found in subjects with eating disorders. So what is alexithymia? Alexithymia, I've seen this a lot, is the inability to use words and to speak, especially to communicate feelings and emotions, or to even identify feelings and emotions. It's not that they don't want to, it's that they just cannot find the words. And I found that over time, somebody who is alexithymic, that they want to communicate these emotions. They have a lot inside, and it can grow and grow and grow. And eventually, if they don't have another outlet to express these thoughts and feelings and emotions, one of two things happens. They can either explode, and I've asked them what happens when they explode, and they have mentioned that it can damage relationships, friendships, things. And if they implode, then they often turn to destructive behaviors to try and express those emotions. And we see addictions and eating disorders and self-harm that happens from that. So this quote has a little asterisk, so this may be a test question. Often people who have failed at outpatient therapy do so because they either cannot use words or they use words extremely well as a defense. I know I've experienced that throughout my career, and I'm sure that each of you have experienced that as well. So that's the alexithymia piece, is that not being able to use words, but also the flip side of that is that they can speak and talk about things, very deep, very painful feelings, without feeling anything. So part of what I do is try to help them to connect to their feelings and their emotions. Here is a brain scan of somebody with alexithymia. This shows the evidence of the role of the inferior frontal gyrus in acquired alexithymia. So here is a picture of a brain, and here's the inferior frontal gyrus, also on the left hemisphere. So it's just showing kind of that contrast between aphasia and alexithymia, that they're both dealing with left hemisphere language barriers. So we want to do something similar with eating disorders that I did with this other person who had aphasia, where I want to help to reroute language from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere and allow them that opportunity to be able to use words again, to have a voice. Now, sometimes when their primary voice is not an option, I like them to have a secondary voice, some way to express those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions, so that they don't implode or explode. And I ask them a lot, what is your secondary voice? Many of them don't know. So we work on exploring that. Let's try new things. How can you express thoughts, feelings, and emotions when you can't speak about them? And I know for me, my secondary voice is music. But for a lot of our patients, music might not be their secondary voice. So we just had a group this last week where I asked them about the secondary voice, and we did a secondary voice showcase. And I had them kind of show and tell their secondary voice. So we had a lot of people show artwork and express that that's their secondary voice. That's how they communicate. We had people talk about dance. Dance could be, dance and movement could be a secondary voice. A lot of people do journaling, a lot of music, but it doesn't have to be music, just something in order to help you to get whatever is trapped inside out. I wanted to ask if any of you have thought about what your secondary voice is. What is your go-to when your primary voice is not going to work for you at that moment? So you can see right here that there's another test question. Speaking is not an example of a secondary voice. Okay. So I wanted to share some music therapy interventions. What specifically do I use, or what do I do specifically to help the patients at Center for Change to have and find a voice and reclaim voice? So again, here's the brief overview part. I wish I could go into great details about each one of these, but hopefully I can share some examples and some thoughts about each one of these different interventions. So songwriting is one of my favorite things, favorite interventions that we do at Center for Change. I recently came in contact with a former patient who was excited to see me and showed me a notebook. She said, 9 years ago, you taught me how to write music in music therapy. And I had no music background. I had no experience with this at all. And I thought that there was no way I could ever write music. She said, but I started to follow the pattern that you taught, and I started writing my thoughts and feelings. And then she showed me this notebook was about this thick, filled with songs. And she said, this is my #1 coping mechanism now. This is the only way that I can express my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions. And she was very gracious, very grateful for this knowledge, how to write music. So the thing I like about songwriting, and I want to share like my own metaphor with this, that if you have 2 train tracks that are running parallel, and there's a left train track and a right train track, and up ahead on the left train track, you notice some debris. And so you want to make sure that your train doesn't run into that debris. So you've got to get from the left hemisphere to the right, right? The left train track to the right. So you call the station, they pull a lever, and the train track miraculously reroutes. It changes the track and helps you to move from the left track to the right track. And then you can keep going. That is what happens in our brain when we start using symbolism and metaphor. So regular words keep us on the left track. But the second we switch to using symbolism and metaphor, something happens in our brain that helps to reroute that language processing from left to right. So it's like pulling that lever for that train track, and oh, here we go, over to the right hemisphere. So the second we start to use that, it's amazing how I see very clearly these language barriers, these deficits, this difficulty in using words to communicate, to all of a sudden freedom and expression of feelings and the ability to talk about things in a symbolic and metaphoric way. So there's your test question there. Songwriting helps someone struggling with alexithymia by using symbolism and metaphor to reroute language. So one of my favorite songs that we have written in music therapy is actually all about the journey of finding voice and reclaiming voice. And again, this particular group that helped write this song, or that wrote this song together, had a very hard time talking about their pain, but they were able to express those thoughts and feelings through songwriting. And so this is a very deeply emotional journey of going through an eating disorder and eating disorder recovery. And I want to share this song with you. This is actually the process that I go through. Is I teach them how to put their words into structured format, how to organize it, and then gradually we can add a simple melody, and we can add harmony chords to it. And once they get it to the point where they're comfortable with it, we go to a recording studio and they record their own voices, which is very healing for them to hear their voices. And at the end of this song, I challenged each of them to sing a little mini solo, a declaration of freedom, a declaration of having a voice. And they were really kind of freaked out at first. So at the very end, I want you to listen to that in particular, where there are about, I want to say 13 patients that sing I Am Free at the end. And they were so nervous, they were so scared to do this, but it is very, very powerful. So hopefully you can follow along with the words while you listen to the song. I'm going to exit the screen for just a second, and then I'll be back. Okay. I always get a little choked up when I hear them singing that at the end. I remember them, I remember their faces. I actually ran into a former patient who had a chance to be involved in that process. And it's been several years, and she said, "Do you remember that song that we wrote?" She said, "I was number 4 in the I Am Free at the end." And we had a little chat about that. And she said it was so empowering to actually hear my voice on a recording and to realize I do have a voice. You know, I matter. My voice is real and it matters. So thank you for letting me share that. So there's lots of examples of songwriting that help the patients that I work with to get unstuck and to move ahead. So I want to move on to the next one. This is instrumental improvisation. I find this to be a really powerful way of having a voice without using your voice. So what I do is, you can see a lot of examples right there of different instruments. I'll put a bunch of different varying instruments around on the floor and I let them explore. And I say, I want you to choose a voice. I want you to have something that you can have represent you, represent your voice. And I just let them kind of try them out, experiment with the different instruments until they come up with something that kind of resonates with them. And then we'll do all kinds of role plays where they get to speak using their instrument. And it's amazing to me how real this becomes for them, especially when we work on family dynamics. Like, we will role play different family types of situations. And I found that they have a tendency to react and respond as if they were actually right there in their own family dynamic. And sometimes they shrink, or they play very softly, or they choose an instrument that can't be heard. And I give them the option to change instruments. And when I do that, they just, really, I can change my voice? I can. And it's incredible to see them go from maybe a soft instrument like a rain stick that you can hardly hear to maybe a drum, something that has presence, and how empowering that is for them to be able to feel like they have a voice. You know, and I do mention, I say, you know, in your families, you're not able to change anybody else's voice, because really we can only change our own, right? So they get to experiment and find new voices until they find one that feels comfortable, where they feel like they have a presence. And that's very empowering. I was able to read this case study, or learn about this case study where, and this is a test question, you can see that. It involved the amygdala. So I'm going to go down to this next slide for a second, and then I'll come back. So the amygdala is the part of our brain that is in charge of the fight, flight, or freeze. So a lot of our patients are in that kind of survival mode, that fight, flight, or freeze. And when they are in that state of mind, it's very difficult to do any kind of processing. They lack a lot of insight. They're just trying to survive, and they're a little bit checked out in group. And so this study is very significant for what I do, because what they were able to see is that there was significant decreased activation of the amygdala, that fight, flight, or freeze mode, during instrumental improvisation. So as they are using instruments as their voices, they are actually able to kind of move beyond that survival mode, that fight, flight, or freeze, and feel some things, make some connections. And we got a lot of deep processing, a lot of really powerful work done during that time. There are a couple of other things during that study. Singing also helped to decrease activation of the amygdala, and listening to music helped as well. Okay, drumming. We do a lot of drumming. I focus on basically 3 different types of drumming. We do a lot of West African drumming. We do Brazilian drumming, we do Middle Eastern drumming. So those are the 3 main things that I do. Sometimes I'll explore and do some other things, but for the most part, those are the 3 things. Now, drumming is also a form of instrumental improvisation, but it's a little bit more structured. The very first sound we're ever exposed to as human beings is a heartbeat. And so anytime we establish a rhythmic pattern and it's consistent, then it almost becomes this meditative state. If we can drum all together and establish this consistent rhythmic pattern, it's got that feel of a heartbeat. And I can see the anxiety level of the room just come down. almost instantly. It's like very soothing to them, very calming. You think it would be the opposite. Drumming would be like, ah! But they actually love it. It's very calming for them, very structured. But drums can also be a very powerful voice. So this quote, I love drumming because I can scream without screaming. Drumming becomes a way to express feelings that are patients who struggle with perfectionism. And that extends into feelings too. So they feel like, okay, these feelings are okay to talk about because they're more perfect feelings, but these feelings, oh, those are bad feelings, so I can't talk about those. And anger is one of those kinds of feelings that they avoid because they feel like they are not good feelings. They are not perfect feelings. And so drumming allows them to express feelings that they feel might not be good feelings to express. So I'm not going to go to that one yet. So a couple more things about, I did have an experience with drumming that was really empowering for this particular patient when she had been doing some trauma work, and she said that she was able to envision the face of an abuser's, the face of her abuser on the head of her drum. And it's the first time that she felt powerful over that person, or a sense of empowerment as she hit the drum. So that was an interesting example. But I wanted to talk about some more healing components of drumming. So I talked about that kind of meditative, that soothing thing. There is something called entrainment. It was developed by Christian Huygens in the 1600s, and he was the inventor of the pendulum clock. And what he did is, as he was developing this idea of pendulum timepiece, he had a bunch of different prototypes in his workshop all over. And as he set these pendulum clocks all over his workshop, he noticed that the pendulums were all kind of swinging willy-nilly, and he wasn't sure how he was gonna get this to be a timepiece. But he went away for a while, and I'm not sure how long he went away for, but when he came back, he noticed a strange phenomenon. He noticed that all the pendulums were completely synchronized. They were swinging in harmony with one another, and this idea of entrainment was born. And we've since been able to discover that entrainment happens all the time in science, in nature. It's just anytime you have two varying frequencies next to each other long enough, they will synchronize. Doesn't matter what they are. We see one particular example with the opera singer and the glass. So you have a crystal glass that has its own frequency of vibration, and then you have the opera singer's voice, which is a second frequency. And if they are next to each other long enough, I'm sure you've all seen this happen, but the glass will actually shatter. They synchronize, they entrain. And I see that happening with drumming. So it's soothing for the patients because they're expressing feelings. They are talking without talking. They're screaming without screaming, but they are also connecting to each other. They're connecting to their thoughts and feelings. And this idea of connection is very healing for them. A lot of our patients are they isolate so much. They have a lot of shame about their behaviors and their disorders, and they don't like to be around people. And having their heartbeats completely synchronized during drumming is a new experience for a lot of them. They love it. So that is a test question. The entrainment, so the heartbeat is one frequency and the drum beat is a second frequency. And if we do that long enough, they do synchronize. And I actually, if I feel like entrainment is happening, if synchronicity is happening, I have them stop drumming and take their pulse, and they're always just blown away that their pulse is all unified, that they all have this matching heartbeat. It's very soothing when that happens. Okay, let's talk about singing. So singing, we do a lot of singing. It's not the kumbaya kind of singing. Sometimes we do that, but we do a lot of group singing, but I also have them do solo singing. We do karaoke singing. We showcase songs they've written singing. We are singing a lot. And I love singing. It's a way for them to reclaim their voice. And I always start off singing with asking them how they feel about their voice. And I have a lot of feedback with that. A lot of times I'll have patients say, well, I don't sing. I don't sing. And I'll ask, okay, well, what's happened in your life to keep you from singing? They kind of get thrown a little bit and think back, because I feel like singing is innate. I feel like I've never met a young child who didn't love to sing. And let's get real. How many of us love to sing? Maybe not in front of people, but when you're in your car, when you're in the shower, I bet that most of us love to belt it out. So what happens from that innate love of singing, where we sing all the time as small children, to I'm not going to sing? So there's a disconnect there. And I had them kind of think about that for a little bit. And I had that experience with my own son, who loved to sing, sang all the time. And he kind of sang at one volume and one note. I loved it because he loved it. And when he came home from school one day, he was in 5th grade, 10 years old. And he just had this sad look on his face. And I asked him, I said, what's wrong? And he said, well, we're practicing for the 5th grade program. And my teacher asked me to mouth the words and not sing. And he was so heartbroken. But what's even more heartbreaking about that situation is that he is nearly 19 now, and I haven't heard him sing since. Not since he was 10 years old, not a note. And we've talked about it, and he just says, I just don't sound good. I just don't have a good voice. And when I ask the patients to kind of think on why they've stopped singing, many of them have a very similar story, a similar experience to why they stopped singing. And I noticed one day in group that there was a particular patient who was flipping through the songbooks. Sometimes we use songbooks and I have the guitar and we sing. And I challenged them to sing just loud enough so they can hear themselves, to acknowledge that they have a voice. And this particular patient was one that she's, I will not sing. I will not sing. I said, you don't have to sing, but the opportunity is there. And I noticed she was flipping through the songbook and stopped on a particular song. And I could tell that song probably had some deeper meaning for her. She asked the group, can we sing this song? I'm not going to sing it, but can you sing the song? Sure. So we started to sing the song together as a group. And about halfway through the song, I noticed, I don't know if she was singing, but she was mouthing the words for sure. And then about 3/4 of the way through the song, I noticed tears rolling down her face. And her mouth was moving. So I assumed she was singing. After the song ended, I asked, okay, can you talk about, I noticed you had some emotion while you were, while we were singing this song, and she could hardly speak. She was so choked up. And she said, I have not sung in 20 years, not at all, until today. When I was a young child, my father told me that I sounded terrible when I sang, and it really hurt me, and I haven't sung since. And she said, it's the first time I've taken my voice back, and it felt really good. It felt really good to sing. And it was a beautiful moment. It was a beautiful experience, and I hope that she keeps that with her. And I still look forward to the day when my son takes his voice back and decides to sing just for the love of singing. It doesn't matter if you can't hit a note or if you're a professional singer, right? We sing because we love it and it feels good. And the reason it feels good, this was just a quote real quick about how singing can also help us to experience entrainment, where our heart rates can sync up during singing. But this is one of the reasons we love to sing. It's innate. It connects us to feelings and emotions. It helps us to have a voice. But there was a study done by Kumar in 1999. He actually worked with Alzheimer's patients, and he withdrew blood pre and post music therapy, especially singing. And he noticed some significant changes in neurotransmitter levels and neurohormones during singing, pre and post music therapy. And some of them, and this is a test question, were elevated melatonin, elevated norepinephrine, elevated epinephrine. The melatonin levels remained increased for 6 weeks, which is kind of cool. But he also noticed elevated endogenous neurotransmitters, which are your endorphins. So there were a couple of other trace ones as well. So singing feels good on a biological level. It's helping us to release endorphins in our brain. So we sing because we love to sing. There was another example of why somebody sings particular to eating disorders. I found this one really interesting. It's something I hadn't thought about before, but a patient had said that her urges to purge are the very strongest first thing in the morning. That when she wakes up in the morning, she just has this overwhelming, overpowering urge to purge. And she said that she has learned that if she can sing first thing in the morning, that's the only thing that kind of stops that intense desire to purge. And she said it will actually last all day long. If she can sing first thing in the morning, then she doesn't have that urge to purge, and she can go all day long without that intense feeling of wanting to do that. So I thought that was really cool. And she's discovered that singing actually helps turn off something in her brain where she can feel a little bit more calm with that. Okay. Sound healing and toning. Here's another test question, sound healing. So sound healing, I have the same, you can see a picture of them, these crystal bowls. And when you play the crystal bowl, it makes a pretty strong sound wave. And this sound wave is something that the patients can feel in their bodies and identify in their bodies. And this helps with mind and body connection, which is a huge part of finding voice. Using your voice to tone is doing the same thing. So you can actually create a sound wave by making certain tones with your voice that helps to create that sound vibration, sound wave in their body that helps them identify and have body mindfulness, body awareness. And that connection, so sound healing, sound waves and sound vibration, creating balance within the body. So mind and body connection, how is that relevant to having a voice? I wanted to share a story about a friend of mine. I actually asked a friend to meet me at the zoo one day. It was in the middle of summer. It was very hot that day. Probably, it was definitely triple digits, maybe 103 that day, and a very, very warm day. And my friend actually showed up at the zoo in a black turtleneck sweater and black thick pants and boots. And I was very concerned about my friend because it was a very hot day that day. And all day long, I kept looking at my friend, looking for signs of distress, looking for signs of heat stroke or anything. And my friend showed absolutely no signs of distress all day long. And afterwards, I was able to have a very heart-to-heart conversation with this friend. And I said, do you remember when you came to the zoo and you were dressed in a black sweater? Weren't you uncomfortable? And this friend looked at me and kind of with a confused look on her face, and she said, you know what? I don't know. I really don't know when I'm uncomfortable. And it kind of came out that this friend has experienced some early childhood trauma and has been completely disconnected from her body for many, many years. And this experience helped her to kind of gain some awareness about, oh, maybe I was uncomfortable, but I didn't register it. So for our clients, when they are disconnected to that extent, it can be dangerous. You know, not just heat stroke or things like that, but they can go long periods of time without eating and not feel that discomfort. They can do self-harm without feeling discomfort, but also they're disconnected from their emotions and their feelings. When they're disconnected from physical needs, they're disconnected from emotional needs. How can they ever possibly learn how to voice what those needs are? How can they use a primary voice or a secondary voice to get those needs met? So sometimes they know that they have needs, but they don't even know how to voice them because they're disconnected. So I found that when their mind and their body reconnect, they are actually able to much better understand, identify, and voice their needs, either through their primary voice or their secondary voice. And when they get their needs met in a constructive and healthy way, they're less likely to turn to destructive behaviors, which addictions, eating disorders, self-harm, things like that. So I do try to use different interventions to help them connect mind and body, to help them to identify their needs and to connect to that. And one of the other things that I'd like to do with mind and body connection, so we've done sound healing, a lot of toning and a lot of sound vibration where they're mindful of the sound in their bodies. But I like to do body percussion, which actually provides them some spatial awareness of their body. They're touching their bodies, and so they can't ignore that they have a body because they're touching it, and it helps them to have a more positive experience with their body instead of maybe some of the negative thoughts they've had about their bodies. A lot of times they disconnect from their body because they hate their body. They have a lot of very awful feelings about their body and body image issues and things. And so they disconnect. So when they reconnect, sometimes it's very uncomfortable for them because they don't want to be present in their bodies. But when we do things like body percussion, we're able to create a positive association. They're able to have a positive experience with their bodies. You can see it's a test question. Body percussion involves communication between mind and body. So I'm going to leave the screen for a second. I want you to just see a brief example of how we do body percussion, and you are more than welcome to play along. I won't keep on this for very long, but I just wanted you to see an example of how we use body percussion. All right. Hopefully you got some good energy out doing that. I wish we had time to do more of that, but they have a really good time with it. They laugh a lot, and they're actually aware of their body, present in their body, and feeling their body and having a positive experience with their body. And that is just so empowering. So in conclusion, I wanted to end with a story. This is Elizabeth Smart. Now, some of you may know her story, some of you may not, but Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped at knife point from her bedroom when she was 14 years old, and she was held in captivity for about 9 months. And during those 9 months, horrific things happened to her. And when she was rescued after 9 months, she described to her mom how she felt about herself. This is in her book, My Story. She said she felt like a beautiful crystal vase that had been knocked off the table and shattered all over the floor. She said, I may have been valuable at one point. I may have been worth something to somebody at one point, but now I'm shattered, I am broken, and I am worthless. And her mom, I'm going to paraphrase this, but her mom said something so profound in response to this. She said, basically, this man stole 9 months of your life. Don't give him one more second. And that was the turning point for Elizabeth. She was able to take that to heart and to move forward with her life. And I want to say something similar, that who stole your voice, whatever stole your voice, whatever things have happened to take your voice away from you, I want you to think about how long they have had your voice. And then I want to say the same thing to you. Take it back. Don't give them one more second. This is your voice. It matters. You matter. The things you say, the things you think, the things you feel are important. You are needed. You are necessary in this world, and your voice matters. Your voice is a part of you, and it is who you are. And I want to challenge you to take it back. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lynette. We really appreciate your time. I know we've got a few minutes here. If you have questions and you don't have time to put them in the question in the toolbar, feel free to email us at cfcwebinar@gmail.com, and we'll get those over to Lynette, and she can answer those for you. Again, it's cfcwebinar@gmail.com. I also wanted to just say a real quick thing to please fill out the evaluation and to watch for the follow-up email with instructions regarding taking the post-test and receiving a certificate of attendance. All right, so we've got some things here real quick. So Kylie is asking, is that body percussion video available on YouTube?
Yes, and so many others. Like you can find any song pretty much ever, and different levels of difficulty. So I'll often start them out with something more simple, and then we get progressively harder. So yeah.
Great. She also said when right after playing the Center for Change song that you guys put together, she said that was incredible. So there's that piece. Do you know what is charcoal medication? It was on that first slide that you had brought up.
I don't know the specific medication, but I do know that he suffered with dysentery. So I know that he was given charcoal medication to help with that. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Someone asked I didn't get the YouTube. What is the title I can look up? I think it's for that YouTube video that you pulled up.
The one I just played?
Yes.
So it would be under body percussion. So if on YouTube, type in body percussion, especially body percussion play along. Okay. And that's Can't Stop the Feeling by Justin Timberlake.
And then, oh, someone is asking, Chris is asking, do you, oh, something just flipped on me, sorry. Get back to it. Do you have an opportunity to work with clients individually on reclaiming their voice? Is there something different that you do with them?
Oh, what a great question. You know, there have been different times throughout my career where an order has been written, and I've been able to do some one-on-one work in helping clients with different things, and finding voice is one of them. And we've had some powerful success with that. Mm-hmm. There has to be a specific order written for that, though.
Okay. Someone writes, if you want to recommend music therapy to a client, are there any specific websites or YouTube videos you could recommend as a great introduction?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a really good question. I could direct them to our American Music Therapy Association website, and I'm sure that there are a lot of resources on there. AMTA.org, I believe.
Let's see. What level of care are you typically working with, and how long does it take for a project like your songwriting or recording?
Ooh, those are good questions. And I have, I work with several units where we have high acuity down to partial hospitalization. So I'm working with the gamut, and they do have different cognitive abilities based on kind of where they are health-wise, right? So, but I have done songwriting with high acuity and found great success with that. So the songwriting process, because it's a collaborative effort, it takes a little bit longer because everybody has an opinion and everybody wants things to be a certain way. So it can take a while. I would say with the technology the way it is, with apps the way they are, songwriting has simplified tremendously, where we can actually write a song relatively quickly. What used to take 2 to 3 months now can be done in a couple of sessions, using an iPad and different apps and things like that. So if you're interested in songwriting, there are a lot of beautiful songwriting apps available.
I think we're good.
Awesome.
I think that's everything.
Yay.
So thank you. So thank you so much, Lynette. We really appreciate you. And we will have more webinars. I think we have one next month. So stay tuned for that in the coming email. And thanks so much for spending time with us today during your lunch break. Thanks so much.
Thank you.